Yes, Pramod?
Yes, sir. 1 minute to go.
Okay, right.
Yes. Yes. May I request Dr. G.A. Gansham, sir, Founder and General Secretary of iSPELL, to start the event formally.
Thank you very much, Pramod. Good evening and namaste to all those who have joined on the platform of iSPELL, Indian Society for the Promotion of English Language and Literature. This society, which has been formed on 5th of September 2020, has a flagship program which is known as Sunday Sahityak Satsang. On every Sunday, we do invite speakers from different walks of life to speak on English language and literature, and to facilitate the people at the same time to elevate them. We always believe every individual has immense talent. The only thing required is to facilitate them and provide them a platform so that they can elevate themselves. Together, we can and we will make a difference. Friends, indeed, it's a very happy journey for iSPELL during the pandemic time. From pandemic, we started and we reached to the pan-academic. So pandemic to pan-academic was a fruitful and a soothing kind of a journey for iSPELL. And these things could happen only because of people like you, those who gather and those who join us on every Sunday to attend this Sunday Sahityak Satsang. Today, on this Sunday Sahityak Satsang in the month of October, we have with us Dr. Murali Krishnan MR TR, who is the event coordinator for the month. Dr. Murali Krishnan is a seasoned campaigner and a very senior associate professor of English from Kerala. And today, he is not only the event coordinator, but he'll also play the role of master of ceremonies. Due to some unavoidable circumstances and the emergency at the end of master of ceremonies, Dr. Veena, we couldn't have her on the platform as a master of ceremonies. So this particular thing, basically the task of a master of ceremony will be taken care by Murali Krishnan TR. And Murali Krishnan TR is the event coordinator for the entire programs of Sunday Sahityak Satsang in the month of October. Without much delay, I would like to Murali Krishnan TR to start the proceedings. Sir, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Gansham. Dr. Gansham is our leader as far as the entire program is concerned, as far as Sunday Sahitya Satsang. And to put it in a nutshell, he is our leader as far as iSPELL is concerned. No doubt about it, because he gives us ideas. We are only there to implement those. And again, is a wonderful human being. Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity for conducting the program during the month of October. Now, today, as it was reported, I have to do two things together. First one being the event coordinator, plus I have to be the master of ceremonies also. And let me once again welcome all the distinguished members, the participants, members of the executive committee, those who have joined today to attend this program. And I need to emphasize two people there. I need to welcome Dr. Preeti Nair and also Dr. Keshav Nath, who obliged to be part of this Sunday Sahityak Satsang. Now, my job now is to introduce the keynote speaker. Keynote speaker is none other than Dr. Preeti Nair, and she will be speaking on deceased bodies, the healing muse. And we are eagerly waiting to know what the topic is all about and how it is going to be a true reflection of what we understand about literature, poetry, and a matter of like interpreting disease in relation with poetry. Now, as far as Dr. Preeti is concerned, she has 27 years of teaching experience, and she is a product of the School of Letters, MG University, Her specialization is in film studies, but she is also well versed in women's studies, translation studies, and media studies. She was a member of the Board of Studies of PG in Muse University, and she has been a resource person to various conferences, national and international. And she's also a subject expert to various faculty recruitment, a selection of teachers. And to top it all, she's the coordinator of IQAC of a college. She is the associate professor and a research guide in the department of PG Department of English, Sri Shankara College, Kaladi. And she has published a lot. She has published various books and articles in various journals and chapters in various books. So it's a big biodata, I should say that. But since we don't have time to go into the details, we would like to listen to what she has to say on this particular topic for today's Sahityik Satsang, Diseased Bodies, the Healing Muse. So without much delay, let me call upon Dr. Preeti Nair to begin with the session and to address us. And later on, we will have a discussion on her paper and on her subject, on the topic that she has presented. Okay, so Dr. Preeti Nair, the entire we are all ears to listen to you. Welcome to you.
Namaste, and thank you very much, Dr. Murali Krishnan, Dr. Ghanshyam, Dr. Keshavnath, all those who are attending this today's session. Okay. Good evening to one and all. First of all, let me thank iSPELL and Dr. Murali Krishnan for giving me this opportunity to present a paper on diseased bodies, the healing muse. When Dr. Murali Krishnan approached me for this, I said, yes, I will do this. But after that, it was, I had to frequent hospitals with my parents, one after another. So it was actually a very bad, or it was such a bad time for me, running from hospital to hospital with my parents. And that was when I actually thought about this topic. I am a person who was actually thinking about doing something on media, but rushing from hospital to hospital, I thought, why not do something about hospitals as such, or something about disease? And that is how I came to this topic, diseased bodies. Moreover, October is the month of breast cancer awareness. And today is World Mental Health Day. So I thought I'll do something on diseases. But rather than speaking about mental illness, I would rather concentrate on the diseased bodies, bodies that are at pain, bodies that are suffering, and how poetry reflects these sufferings. And that is how I've reached this title, Diseased Bodies, the Healing Muse. So before I start with my topic, I would like to present my screen. Just a minute. Is the screen clear? Hope you can see my screen.
Yes, visible.
Yes. Thank you. So the topic, as I've said, is diseased bodies, the healing muse. And I've already told you that I'm going to focus on how disease, how the body, how the illness of the body, of the pain of the body is reflected through poetry, and how poetry can give you, or how poetry can give a soothing effect to this pain, to this trauma. And my proposed plan is to examine pathography and poetry, examine specific examples of poetry related to hospital, pain, hushed voices, violated bodies, therapeutic powers of poetry, and, if possible, the scope of study as well. So this is how I tend to go through this topic. Now, when we speak about illness, I was caught by this quote, which says, Robinson Crusoe, this is what I think of. Surviving a terrible storm at sea, then being shipwrecked, waking from catastrophe, and finding oneself in a new and alien world. These lines that I've quoted are not told by a survivor of a shipwreck. In fact, these are words of a lady who has had a brain tumor and has had an operation to remove it. Her experiences have been recorded in a book, Surviving. And she writes this book, Surviving, because when she goes to the bookshop in order to find a similar book which can narrate the pain that she had gone through, she finds that she does not come across any such works in the library, in the bookshop, sorry. And it is this, when she saw that there are no books that can explain the trauma that one faces on having faced cancer or brain tumor, is what actually made her write this book, Surviving. Now, this book, Surviving, is an example of pathography, a form of biography or autobiography that narrates one's illness, experience of illness, treatment, and even to an extent, the experience of facing death, coming face to face with death. And in their concerns with illness, pathographies are like survival stories or adventure stories, where life is fraught with risks and dangers, where the diseased person, the person who is not at ease, the diseased person is taken into the realm of body that is in pain, that is ill, that is constantly reduced to a series of battles against pain and death. And we have narratives that speak about the experiences, pains that they have suffered as a result of illness. And such types of narratives are known as testimonial pathographies or autopathographies. Or in other words, testimonial pathographies are narratives that intend to simply tell the story of an illness experience with the thrust on the writer's thoughts, feelings, and behavior as complementary to medical treatment. And through their experience sharing, they tend to help others by blending personal experience with practical information. And that is what she does in this book, Surviving. And another example of this is John Sladen Michel's Winning the Chemo Battle. This poem is addressed to people undergoing chemotherapy with an aim of helping readers to plan and work towards their quality of life. Biographical or autobiographical, pathographies have a common motive. That is, to communicate a painful, disorienting, and isolating experience, and to talk and to write about it. So in that sense, pathographies can be viewed as a literary expression of illness and a response to medical trauma. Now, when we speak about illness, and when you try to connect illness with literature or illness to literature, we are reminded again of a quote by Virginia Woolf, where she says, this is a quote, "Among the drawbacks of illness as a matter of literature, there is the poverty of language. English, which can express the thoughts of Hamlet and the tragedy of Lear, has no words for the shiver and the headache, unquote. Now, even when words have failed, the tortured minds have attempted to chart out their illness experience in a myriad forms, such as poetry, novels, and the like. And in spite of the great divide in the representation of illness and suffering, I'm focusing particularly on poetry. Poetry attempts to provide us ways to talk about illness. As
Excuse
a
me,
way
sorry to interrupt, extremely sorry to interrupt. Dr. Preeti, there is a demand to make it as a slideshow.
Okay,
Now,
I'm sorry.
no problem.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so as a way of articulating or voicing or providing us ways to talk about illness, the lived experience of illness, poetry actually throws open a window, emphasizing in its singular way discontinuity, surprise, and the uneasy relationship between words and the life of the body. And according to John Fox, in his book, Finding What You Didn't Lose, he says, there is something personal and private about poetry. It is a journey into the depths, a journey for the poet as well as the reader. It crystallizes essences. And Campo, in his book, The Healing Art, a Doctor's Black Bag of Poetry, in that he tries to highlight the therapeutic and healing effects of poetry. And for him, poetry is a wellspring for fresh metaphors that considers illness in radically new ways. Now, these types of attempts are aimed at offering, as I told you, a soothing effect to the writer as well as to the reader. It offers a sort of catharsis that Aristotle spoke of. Poetry is a relevant source within a scientific and academic context for the exploration of chronic pain experience. And the poem and the person endeavor to make a sense of the chaotic thinking, restoring a feeling of balance and of wholeness in oneself through words. By better understanding their own experience of their pain and of the internal chaos that inhabits them, people may begin to open up, learning to accept their lives with pain. So those who are in pain, they speak out their experiences, and through that, they try to live, they try to accept the pain that they are through. They recognize it, they accept this illness as part of themselves. They accept their lives with pain. Now, the cathartic poem, I use the word cathartic because I told you it offers a sense of catharsis. It purges them of that feeling of pain. The cathartic poem, when offered by the suffering person, is an invitation with encouragement to say, to write, or to artistically represent an interpretation of their suffering. And it is clear that this process is one that is freely given, often from personal, chaotic reflections. They reflect on their experiences, and this act of reflection allows for an interpretation of the narratives. Finding a means to express these internal thoughts and interpretations, such as transposing these thoughts into poetry, provides a novel form of expression. And these transposing process moves our internal thoughts onto the written page, creating a space for our inner thoughts to be in the world in a tangible way, as if we were pulling the narrative out of ourselves and laying them down before us. We can now hear the pain, we can see it in a different perspective. And the written page, the poetry that is in front of us, is the truth written out at that moment of time. The experience of pain highlighted. Now, when examining poetry that reflects on diseases or pain, we can find a number of poems written by doctor poets. There are also a number of poems written from the perspective of a patient and even from the perspective of a bystander. So you have poems written by doctor poets, poems written by the patients themselves, and poems written by bystanders, those who have seen the suffering, who witness the suffering. There are poems that focus on the hospital. And Sylvia Plath's Tulips is a first-person account of a hospital stay, during which the numbness and anonymity associated with the clinical environment highlights the speaker's growing distance from her family, as well as her fragile mental state. She speaks about the nurses bringing numbness in their needles. She seems to be a nobody in the hospital. When the nurses clean her, she feels as though she is a nun. So, and she feels as though her 30-year-old cargo boat, she lets go of that 30-year-old cargo boat. She feels it floating. And she remains a nobody in this hospital. Now, what I will do now is I'll focus on certain poems written by physician poets or doctor poets, as I've said. And I'll start with the Song for Pythagoras, written by Danny Abse. The poem goes like this: white coat and purple coat, a sleeve from both he sews. That white is always stained with blood, that purple by the rose. And phantom rose and blood most real compose a hybrid style. White coat and purple coat, few men can reconcile. White coat and purple coat, each can be worn in turn, but in the white, a man will freeze, and in the purple, burn. Here, Dr. Abse presents two things. He repeats the white coat and a purple coat. The white coat stands for the scientist or for the doctor, and the purple coat for the poet. When he writes his poetry, he says, I feel that poetry shouldn't be an escape from reality, but rather an immersion into reality. And part of my reality was indeed my hospital life at that time. And so I became prepared to write poems which had medical undertones. And Abse's extensive and explicit incorporation of medical themes in his poetry is thus, you find lots of poems, almost 84 poems in which he speaks about the medical theme, about poetry, which are medically colored. And the collection itself, he had this collection of poems of 180 poems, and this collection itself is titled White Coat, Purple Coat, referring to his dual personal commitment to medicine and poetry. However, Abse found his medical training and early experiences as a doctor traumatic. Now, why he writes this medical poetry is because as a doctor, he finds his experience as a doctor painful, traumatic, the experiences that he has in the hospital. As a medical, this is what he says, as a medical student, I was spiritually bruised by what I had witnessed in casualty or in outpatients at Westminster Hospital. It was only from 1962, with an increasing conviction that poetry should immerse itself in common reality and not an escape from it, that he started writing poems that touched strenuously on his medical experiences. And the first of these poems that he writes in this collection is The Pathology of Colors, which shows how profoundly such experience, his experience in the hospital, could influence his outlook. For whereas rainbows often give rise to feelings of wonder and beauty, for a doctor, such colors may be bleakly associated with acute medical conditions. So he is connecting the colors of the rainbow with his medical experiences. So this is how it begins, the poem begins. So in the simple blessing of a rainbow, in the beveled edge of a sunlit mirror, I've seen visible death's artifact like a soldier's ribbon on a tunic tacked. This rainbow, which he speaks about, the simple blessing of a rainbow, this rainbow is associated with death. In Pathology of Colors, the way in which the poet confronts and manipulates the disturbing materials is through the juxtaposition of images of the normal everyday world outside medicine, which you can call as the life world, the experiences outside medicine, and with images from the biomedical world. So that is how he presents this point. There is this juxtapositions of the life world with the biomedical world. And the result is making something bearable out of the unbearable. And in this case, as he says, it is a poetic artifact, death's artifact, which becomes a poetic artifact. And in the first stanza, the doctor speaker makes seemingly simple statements of opinions about color, then modifies them with reference to color as they appear in a medical context. I know the color rose and it's lovely, but not when it ripens in a tumor. And healing greens, leaves and grass, so spring-like in limbs that fester, are not spring-like. So in the second stanza, I know the color rose and it's lovely, but not when it ripens in a tumor. The first line is so pleasant, so natural, and that is negated by the shocking ending of the second line. The word tumor, when it ripens in a tumor. Even the word ripens in the second line is misleading. When you connect it with the color rose, it appears misleading, only to reveal the tumor. In the third line, again, the imagery is healthful and bountiful. The healing greens, the leaves and grass. Yet fester is what the limbs do in the stanza's last line. So what the speaker is doing is showing the shock that ensures when colors once associated with joyful scenes have been marred and changed through the experiences of his vocation as a doctor. Colors now have a pathology. The color of plums is reminiscent of suicide victims' faces. When the poem continues, you have the color of plums, which is reminiscent of suicide victims' faces. The white china reminds him of a car crash, fatalities, staring eyes. And actually, the poet's wife too died of a car accident. And in the third stanza, there is a religious image used to describe the opened belly, where he says it's pulled away flaps, revealing all the vibrant colors one might find in a stained cathedral window. And by the poem's ending, each color's new association becomes like the death's artifact that is presented in the fourth line of the first stanza. A shade left by man's last encounter, a mark of mortality which only few will see, but those who have seen it will see it forever. In Pathology of Colors, Abse describes the curse of a doctor's insight. The fact that colors are to an extent spoiled for him by his knowledge of their appearance in horrifying medical situations. At a doctor's privileged insights into many wondrous physical phenomena and his ability to cure and help are also the subject of some of his medical poems. Now, as when he in the late 1980s, when he remembers his early medical student experiences in the dissecting room at King's College, that it made him write a long poem meditating on the unpleasantness of such activity and its relationship to life and death. He considered this essential component of medical studies as a violation of a once living person, and it troubled him greatly. Abse's writing thus shows that it exposes the spiritual bruising, itself a description of unusual intensity that can have a profound and long-lasting effect. One point that really touched me was the stethoscope. A very short poem, but the first 4 to 5 lines, that really touched me. It gave me a shock, actually. This poem, The Stethoscope, is written in first person, and it has the doctor speaker wonder at his ability to hear the first and last sounds of life through the instrument, the stethoscope. And this is how he describes that. Through it, over young women's tense abdomens, I have heard the sound of creation, and in a dead man's chest, the silence before creation began. It's worth noting that Abse uses the noun creation rather than life, or a more biological word for pregnancy here. It is presumably because he is drawing a parallel between life and death in lines 3 and 5. And Abse's poems reveal an understanding of the doctor's dichotomous life. He is both, where he is both an ordinary human being as well as a medical professional. He is granted the ability to heal and also the ability to look on people at the most vulnerable. Yet he is also a human being, as fallible as other people. So these are types of poetry that reveals the pain or the trauma that the doctors also face once inside the hospital, the experiences, how those experiences touch them. Now we look into pain related to patient poets. By patients about their experience of illness, pain, or disability, focusing on kinds of information that these poems provide, and on how caregivers may learn new techniques of listening This is one effect of writing poetry. You give caregivers or the doctors new techniques of listening from the hard-won words of people whose suffering has led them beyond the constraints of what narrative, case history, or story can fully accommodate. These poems by patient poets, they dwell on experiences of pain, hospital experiences, incidents that deal with private experiences, and so forth. And first, I will focus on the poems by patient poets, which focus on pain. And for that, I will start with this poem, Still Life with Open Window. This is a poem written by Karen Fisher, and it recalls the pain and disorientation that Karen experienced after her first surgery. Now, the title, Still Life with Open Window, that can be interpreted in ways.
Hello.
It is an open window that suggests a world beyond domestic walls. Again, you can interpret it as still life with an open window, that the speaker still has a life and that there is an open window that invites her to imagine a world beyond the hospital. The poem begins by saying, I went to life as one woman, silken, magic, strong, my life full of intelligence, bravura episodes, and turns of phrase. I woke up all stitching and sorrow with the silence around me, like the endless quiet at the edges of a late Rembrandt self-portrait. The speaker moves in an orderly way from an initial observation about the sense of change in a body to a reflection on how time itself has changed. All stitching and sorrow speaks about how complete the loss of what she once was. Since to connect in moment with another is different, she will have to, she has changed. And so therefore she has to connect with another self. And therefore she will have to devise different strategies of self-identification and self-love. Now this stanza, this particular stanza represents a metamorphosis. The narrator gives us first a picture of what she was like before her illness. The words she uses are indicative of fullness, wholeness, and an abundance of sound. The narrator was one woman. I went to sleep as one woman, suggesting a whole woman, not one that has been fractured by pain. She is also full of intelligence. Nothing has been removed. The word bravura and the expression turns of phrase suggests speech and music. Now, bravura actually applies to a brilliant passage of piece that explains the performer's skill and technique. So she is a whole. Now, she has not been affected, yet sleep intones a period of silence. A cocoon in which this woman's transformation occurs. The fulcrum of the phrase is actually in the word turns and turns of phrase. So the point here is turns. For one can see in this word the foreshadowing of the turn the poem is about to take. From fullness to sorrow, silken to stitching, bravura to silence. And Fisher deliberately places the silence around the narrator like a cocoon, and it is at the edges of a Rembrandt portrait that she wants, and that is there that she wants to stop. And voyeurs to this narrator's tragedy, we are not allowed beyond this point of access. Until the next, you have the speech after long silence, it is right. Time spent in pain exists absolutely without structure. Demarcation of relief, it is all one color, like winter's rainy sfumato inscriptions on gray. Meanwhile, the other inner life goes on, unwitnessed. The shadow a tree makes on the wall, rippling like water. In this stanza, the transformation occurs brilliantly within the words. In the first stanza, Pfizer had excluded us from the narrator's pain. You only know that there is a change from this oneness. We are not let into the pain, but the pain is existing absolutely perfect. Time spent in pain exists absolutely. So Pfizer has excluded us from the narrator's pain. However, slyly, almost without noticing, we are drawn into the pain in the second stanza, where the pain is presented as existing absolutely, perfect, complete, and whole, even though the full woman of the first stanza is gone. You don't have the one woman now. Furthermore, through the narrator's pain actually places us distinctly at the edge of something. Even though she places us at the edge of this Rembrandt self-portrait, she says that pain is without structure. And she's now suggesting an inner life inside the cocoon that still goes on. Though she claims that this life is unwitnessed, life goes on, the inner life goes on, unwitnessed. Through the poem's language, what actually happens is we are in fact witnessing this inner life. The poem then shifts towards intimating an emergence. Since nothing outward remains to signify or to connect one moment with another, no more achieved life for the moments to be part of. They will have to be connected by what can flower within the moment themselves. Each moment must expand to hold my infinite singing joy. Now, notice the words used here. Outward, connect, achieved, flower, expand, infinite. All these suggest an emergence to the outward, an interaction with the outside. They also suggest the opposite of uncertainty. The incubation or the cocooning period has left the narrator with certainty and purpose. Now she knows that she must find in each moment an expansion, and that the result of this expansion will be an infinite singing joy. So this poem actually suggests also the life within the cocoon, which was said as unwitnessed. The body recovers during times of inactivity. It turns itself inward, repairs those things that are damaged, replenishes itself. Just as a caterpillar requires a diet of vegetation before the transformation into a butterfly, so does the human mind require a feast of words to gain wisdom. So here, through these words, she is trying to console herself of the pain, and she tries to come out of this pain that she has been experiencing. She tries to connect one moment with another, to connect her broken self, to make it again another whole, and trying to hold on to that infinite singing joy. Now we see a similar process of self-observation, chronicling and imaging in Mary Bradish O'Connor's poem, Midnight Cancer, which is from a collection entitled Say Yes Quickly. Like Fisher's, this poem also offers an intimate view of pain and focuses attention on how a disease changes the way she lives in. The poem traces a circadian cycle, telling a story that has phases but no trajectory. That the title, I've actually given this title Midnight Cancer, but like Emily Dickinson's poems, this does not have a title as such. The first line itself is a title, and that contributes both to an ominous momentum and to a sense that there is nowhere to stand outside this experience. The title stands out. Here you do not have a title to stand out. So it actually, even the way the title is presented, the so-called title, it doesn't have a title, it tries to present that there is nowhere to stand outside this experience. Once the fearsome thing has been named, you are inside the fear. It has been named and you're inside the fear. And this is how the poem goes. Midnight Cancer is a bottomless pit where voices echo around and round, endlessly repeating the same prayer. Oh God, why me? Sooner or later, midnight cancer changes to morning cancer, brighter, more hopeful. Somewhere the sun rises warm and round. Birds are singing. After a while, morning cancer melts into afternoon cancer, where it hides among coals. Cut the grass, clean the downspouts, drain the noodles. Later, the house falls silent, and even the dog is asleep. There might or might not be rain. Without a sound, you're falling, arms wide and circling. It's midnight. You have cancer. If you notice, these are short lines. These short lines invite us to take in a phrase at a time, as though each partial thought occurs separately and requires its own burst of effort. A number of lines offer momentary resolution, but it is quickly dissipated. The following line will disrupt the temporary respite of a happy image. You have the image of the sun, the singing, the noodles. The long single stanza suggests the relentlessness of an inescapable condition. Though anxiety waxes and wanes, no real break is actually offered, no place to breathe slowly, take stock, or to take a fresh point of view. One line to another, there is this continuous jump. And the point of view established in this poem is one of its most significant features. The poetess surprises the reader with the second person, inviting and even commanding unsettling identification with the speaker in a condition that might so easily be yours. She introduces the startling you only towards the end. You are falling. Up to that point, cancer is the subject of each sentence. We are focused on what it does rather than what the person with cancer feels. Feeling remains implicit, as though it is safer somehow to describe the experience in objective terms. So the you that is presented here, you have cancer, you has two purposes. It forestalls the more naked declaration, I have cancer, by positing that claim as a kind of hypothetical, and by saying, here's what happens when people have cancer. It also compels empathy. Imagine this, enter into it, go there, feel. It's midnight, you have cancer. This is how it's going to be. The speakers, through the poem, the poet conveys an experience of illness that is not progressive except in its increasing familiarity. The speaker's accommodation lies not much in reflection of the character or her pain as in close consideration of what makes pain and fear manageable. At least in the midst of the daily distractions. But every night brings its renewal of terror. It's midnight. The ordinariness of the day and of the images associated with daytime gives way to the uncertainties of nighttime. The uncertainties is presented through the line, there might or might not be rain. And a final image of panic. You have this final image of panic when it's said, falling, arms wide and circling. The terror with which the poem begins and ends is like a bottomless pit, which reminds us of Dante's hell. And time for this poet may be measured by the welcome distractions each day brings and the hours spent between those moments when the raw truth dawns upon you. You have cancer. And this occupies the mind. Now, these are poems. In this poem, we were speaking about cancer. The poetess speaks about this experience of cancer. Now, despite increased clinical candor and much public discussion about illness and disability, there are some conditions that are spoken only behind closed doors, or that are spoken only with an edge of unease. It has always been the case that some diseases carry a stigma, while others invite and receive ready sympathy. The former remain consigned to the shadowy realm of taboo. And why I say this is the next point that I'm going to look into belongs to this category where it speaks about a personal experience of abortion, which can be riddled with emotional pain, guilt, and grief. The loss of something more consequential than blood and tissue is undeniable for the woman who has just traveled the steep trajectory of feeling from lovemaking to pregnancy test to decision-making to the clinic to have an abortion. And suddenly she finds herself not only in a new stage of life, but she experiences this uniquely difficult and highly charged experience. And the poem that I am looking into is Anne Sexton's poem, The Abortion, which faces the physical and psychological facts of loss with bluntness, of trauma. The sorrow itself is pervasive. Everything in the speaker's visual landscape seems to allude to injury. She speaks with a deceptively simple and shocking, blunt line that drives at the heart of the loss. The way she begins the poem, somebody who should have born is gone. Just as the earth puckered its mouth, each bud puffing out from its knot, I changed my shoes and then drove south, up past the blue mountains, where Pennsylvania hums on endlessly, wearing like a crayoned cat its green hair, its roads sunken in like a gray washboard, where in truth the ground cracks evilly, a dark socket from which the coal has poured. Somebody who should have been born is gone. The grass as bristly and stout as shives, and me wondering when the ground would break, and me wondering how anything fragile survives up in Pennsylvania. I met a little man, not Rumpelstiltskin at all. He took that fullness that love began. Returning north, even the sky grew thin, like a high window, looking nowhere. The road was as a sheet of tin. somebody who should have been born is gone. Yes, woman, such logic will lead to loss without depth, or what you meant, you covered this baby that I bleed. The poem circles back 3 times. Just a moment. Sorry for the disturbance. I had to. I'm really sorry for that. So the poem circles back 3 times to opening cry of lament. One can almost see the speaker behind the wheel, rocking back and forth, repeating a mantra of sorrow, narrating her one-sentence story, relocating herself in a world that is now after. The images of grass and cracked ground reinforces the contrast between apparent life and health and the threat of death that seems not specific but pervasive, as though the abortion is just one manifestation of a much larger force at work to deal with. The poem alludes to Rumpelstiltskin, who wove straw into gold, but demanded a woman's firstborn child in return, locating this abortion in the archetypal narrative. But in the tale, the woman finds a way out. She learns the name of the wicked little man who offered her immediate help in return for the forfeiture of her first child, and so wins the cruel bargain and keeps the child. Her cleverness affords her a way out of the appalling loss to which she has agreed. But here it becomes a resolution that this speaker has not been able to find. The little man offered no last-minute revelation to spare her. The repetition of at all, in addition to the accentuated rhythm and rhyme, turns the poem into a chant. And when what the little man took was the fullness that love began, that both avoids and honors the truth of what was taken and destroyed, is connected to an act of love, a promise unkept, a foreshortening of an untold story, a profound disruption in the order of things. Literally, what would have made a body round and full has been removed, and she is defeated. And in the final stanza, the speaker takes her own rhetoric to task. All the metaphors, the rhetorical evasions, the abstraction amount to lies if finally the literal truth is not uttered. What has happened is death. It is a body. She is bleeding. And what is being bled is a terminated life. This baby that I bleed. So this poem actually presents the pain of having to terminate her pregnancy. And the repetition of the line, somebody who should have been born is gone. It seems to echo, create an echo in our ears. It seems to trouble us. And the last words, I bleed. Similar to, I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. In addition to this, where you have poems that dwell on topics that are considered as taboo or something that are not spoken out in the open, there are also poems that speaks about outrageous intimacies. Outrageous intimacies in the sense that where the diseased body feels that the body is affected, or the doctor intrudes upon the body, where the patient feels, or the poetess feels, that the doctor intrudes upon the body. And this is what I would like to term as outrageous intimacies. And one such poem is Alice John's Biopsy, which chronicles a patient's experience of such a permitted invasion, during which the male doctor appears to remain curiously unconscious of the discomfort, even of a woman who has decided to watch her own breast being prepared, cut, and biopsied. The dapper surgeon enters, greets me loudly, hangs his coat on a steel hook next to my slip, as in a cozy household. I lie down and we begin. He preps with those large orange Q-tips, betadine swabs, poking objectively, then asks for lidocaine and fussily tells the nurse to wipe the top off the unopened bottle with alcohol. The fine needle stings, bites deeper. He arranges the green cloth drape. The last has an open square at its center. So my now orange nipple protrudes through one spot of nakedness among our hospital gowns, an absurd striptease. Now the silver dish lights are focused on this point, the small flesh star from which the whole scene radiates. He calls for a 15-inch blade, which then glides without pain, just a pull. I had thought my skin was a permanent seal. Now I watch this layer of myself. The poem begins in recoil. Dapper and fussy suggests the speaker's immediate critical reaction to the surgeon's behavior and dress that so distinctly differentiates him from the gowned and waiting patient. He pokes objectively, without much attention to her exposure. The enforced intimacy of the situation, the unsettling irony involved in hanging his coat next to her slip. For the woman, the whole process appears to be alienating. The necessary violation of privacy is carried out with what is presented as appropriate clinical detachment. But what she experiences is distasteful. The words that describe the surgeon's meticulous preparations, the verbs that are used: he greets, preps, pokes, arranges, calls, asks, and finally makes me, suggests order, ritual, and control. The procedure is described and carried out with matter-of-fact precision. He knows what he's doing in a certain sense, because he does not know what is taking place within her. He seems to have no clue in another sense. The words that describe what is happening from the patient's point of view have a very different feel. Her nipple protrudes. The scene radiates from the small fresh star, one point on her body. The blade pulls on her skin, which sprouts the red flowers of blood after the incision. The cautery crackles. The scissors make their nips, and the tissue is reaped like a small harvest. And she imagines the journey of the sample to the lab, the slicing, the peering, the staining that will provide the information the doctor is after. Her body is a site, a scene, a piece of earth. Her skin is a barrier to be broken. There is a courageous precision as well as invention in the images and analogies the poet appropriates to articulate the process from her point of view, as someone upon whom this invasive procedure is being performed. who has to find a way to accept what she, like all of us, is deeply conditioned to protect herself from. She had thought her skin as was a permanent seal. And this line adds disillusionment to the succession of experiences recorded. Among the images of words that signify familiarity with the tools and the procedures of surgery as well. And some of the words that are used is quite jarring: meaty red hole, pasty. So the play, it also in some places, it also has unavoidable sexual overtones. Her effort to be elsewhere seems to lead her to another image. She also experiences the jarring sight of a nipple being lifted by the stainless steel teeth of the forceps. She reports this process with alarming matter-of-factness through the teeth that leave a meaty red hole. It represents an instrument as predator and her body as prey. Another high-charged word, aborted, that is used in this poem. It forges a similar link between this procedure and another that, however quick and clinical, is inescapably distressing. Professional knowledge of what technicians will do to her tissue sample in the lab is cold comfort. The phrase, "this piece of me," cancels the apparent objectivity of pathology protocols. And the final ambiguity of the poem lies in its allusion to the themes of power and sexuality. The physician has made her his by entering her body. He has done this thing with her consent, to be sure, but has gained the information needed by taking something from her that leaves us scared and changed. So it is as though she has been, her body has been entered into. She has been, there is this outrageous intimacy of this doctor being presented. Now, British poet Glad best in her poem, "Self-Portrait Without Breasts," is an attempt to share public perception by contributing to ongoing discussions about choice in breast cancer prevention and treatment. Now, this poem does not actually speak about breast cancer. It is about an experience of trying to prevent going for a surgery before she faces breast cancer, because the statistics proves that she is likely to get breast cancer. It is there in her family. And going by the statistics, going by the readings, she is likely to get breast cancer. Therefore, this is a poem that focuses on the experiences of a survivor. That is, people who are survivors of a predisposition to cancer, but who hasn't had the disease. Her decision to remove her breast has met with different responses, and women who have taken this path are described as, within quotes, pawns of statistical rhetoric, consumer culture, and biomedicine. In this poem, The Stitch, the poet inverts the trope of cutting and stitching, characteristics of sewing, surgery, but also writing poetry into a matrilinear history, because this disease is in her family. My grandmother knows about seams. New things made from good material may be cut and made again. My grandmother knew about seams. Her abdomen rushed from pubis to sternum. The stitch marks, silver and blue. The seams here refer to the lines where the pieces of fabric are sewn together and where there are these bodily scars. And sewing is like surgery. And this is connected to writing as well. The sewing connected to writing, and again connected to surgery, where the etymological term of is kergoria, ker meaning hand and ergon meaning God in Greek, which has more to do with art, handwork, and fineness and cutting, as best reminds us. And within this field of statistics during the 20th century, the language of risks and odds has penetrated every aspect of our lives, especially questions of illness and health, leading to what Kathleen Woodward has called statistical panic. So this point speaks about that statistical panic. It falls between fear that is attached to a specific object and anxiety that is related to a probability, to varying scenarios, to futures that are statistical in nature. Statistics offer what appear to be scientific certainties, yet say nothing about who will be affected by them. And this is how the statistics are given in the point. The risk of cancer is 85%. How does it sound? The consultant asks. 85% of computers are infected with virus. 85% of lost umbrellas are left on long distance buses. 85% of embryos transferred during IVF fail to be born. 85% of men over 60 spend Sunday mowing the lawn. 85% of sunscreens don't deliver their marketing claims. So the statistical data creating a sense of pain, means sense of fear, making the poetess go forth with this surgery. We are doing with incidents that are qualitatively different, and yet the same statistical percentage that is to them attached to them occludes this. So we have been focusing on poems that deal with pain, poems that deal with illness that are considered as taboo, poems that deal with which try to highlight how the doctors, or they feel that their bodies have been raped in a sense. So through these type of poems, the poets try to calm down their pain, try to soothe themselves, and this is where we have the healing muse, or the therapeutic powers of poetry. And Campion in his book explains why he thinks that student doctors should be encouraged to write, to keep writing. His explanation highlights the importance of the development of an imaginative empathy, capable of understanding pain that is not purely physical. We need now more than ever to be able to conduct ourselves in the realm of the imagination, because what is science if not the dream of something new? What in turn is a novel treatment for cancer without a grasp of human suffering it may help to relieve? What finally is a cure for any terminal disease without a thoughtful confrontation with the death it only temporarily averts? This is a quotation from Campo. Now, medical language is shown to be cold, distant labeling, whereas patient talk is often markedly vernacular, personal content. And this experience, or this talk by the patient, can be termed as the voice of the life word. This is how Mishler calls it, the voice of the life world, the voice that comes from the personal psychosocial context that strives to be heard within the biomedical context of the clinic. And when someone writes a poem, a healing poem, a cathartic poem, there is an abundance of sincerity and emotional influence in it. And as such, these verses are best understood from the motivation behind them. It expresses one's experience and emotions for it is done for a primarily cathartic purpose. Thus, we have Gadamer speaking about Rilke. Rilke wrote in one of his last verses, "Oh, life, life, remaining always on the outside. Oh, life, life, remaining always on the outside." So powerfully does pain cause us to withdraw from all external experience of the world and turn us back upon ourselves. There is this profound sense of despair and inward spiraling of self that occurs through suffering and the endurance of pain. And the cathartic poem promotes movement from the inside, the emotions that are inside, the pain that one experiences in the inside, from the inside to the outside, moving a person to open up a new reality, releasing words onto the page. It's an act of unburdening itself instead of coiling in on oneself. It's a sort of humanizing pain which returns the meaning of pain to the person living with it through reflection. Writing and accepting becomes a way to learn to live with pain with a goal of more than merely managing it, but learning to live well with it, like the first point that we looked into today. Learning to tolerate pain brings us closer to an understanding of the pain. And this means overcoming our resistance to change. Life consists of continuous movement through various emotional stages. We cannot neither hold on to the comfortable ones with apprehension of what might one day change, nor can we remain paralyzed by the grip of nostalgia for the past existence. We must embrace what is right now in this moment and breathe, imagine, and learn. So what we can actually be where we are, not trying to find another state of mind. We come to terms with things as they are in a process or in a definition of healing. So this poetry, by presenting the painful, traumatic experiences, the cathartic poetry, it becomes an instrument through which the mind can be trained to live moment to moment once again. Thank you.
Yes, Murali Krishnan, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think there are a few questions in the chat box.
Yeah, there are a few questions in the chat box. I think two of them are there already. And I think it is from Dr. A.S. Puamma. So we'll begin with the discussion over there. And the first question, so let me I should say the attention of Dr. Preeti to these questions. Is deceased bodies then a pathological issue?
What I'm trying to speak in this is not specifically about pathologies. What pathology is a description of the illness. And here, in what I was trying to do is, I was trying to present the concept of pain or trauma that one faces when one has an illness. So in that sense, it becomes a pathology because you are narrating your illness. You're narrating the trauma, the pain that you had. You're also narrating your experiences of having to go through this process. So in that sense, it is a pathology because it tries to express what one has gone through or one is going through in this period of illness, in this period of disease.
Okay, the second question is the same. Dr. A.S. Verma is asking is, can we say that Stephen Dedalus, the portrait of an artist as a young man, as an example of diseased body? You know, it's actually an intertextual kind of a question. So can we say Stephen Dedalus as an example of diseased bodies?
I'm sorry, I haven't actually gone to that part. I've just focused on poetry. I didn't look into that part. I'm sorry, I won't be able to answer.
No problem, no problem. Maybe it can be a kind of a suggestion then.
Yeah, in fact, sir, can I?
Please, Doctor, please speak.
Actually, James Joyce's The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, Stephen's journey through life prior to his leaving for the continent is not easy. He's a troubled little boy, and later as a young man, Stephen retains his childlike curiosity about people and things, and he continues to make keen observations and displays an acute sensitivity, which eventually causes him to realize that his destiny is to create, to become an artist, and to define his artistic soul. So thus he leaves for the continent, severing himself from his family, his faith, and his country. So when we take a look at it at the larger perspective, I thought it could be an example of the diseased bodies, and the healing muse is his artistic taste. And because he is an artist and a philosopher in that.
Okay, ma'am. That's a wonderful observation. Now, any other question? Those who are interested to ask question, they can ask it now as live, so that they needn't type on chat box. They can ask it directly to the speaker.
So one more thing, if you don't mind, one more little. I read somewhere the Healing Muse is the annual journal of literary and visual art published by SUNY Upstate Medical University Center for Bioethics and Humanities. And it seems psychiatrists more than any other medical specialist would benefit from regular doses of poetry, art, and fiction, such as the Healing Muse offers. And also self-help books for patients and families are regular features of Psychiatric Times, another journal. This is what I collected. So if man can enlighten on that a little more, I'd be happy.
Yes, in fact, there are lots of journals that speak, that focus on literature and medicine. Lots of journals are there that focus on literature and medicine. And we've also, when I was going through this topic, researching on this topic, I also saw that there were many doctors who actually wanted their patients to write about their experiences. They want their patients to write about their experiences so that they could know more about what they are going through, the experiences that they are going through. So through that, they could heal their patients, maybe come about with another option to heal their patients, maybe to empathize with their pain, to empathize with them. And a sort of humanizing takes place. So actually, it is only when I went through this, when I did research on this for this session, that I came across this interesting piece of information.
Yeah, and they also say it's a contemplative food for the soul as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, ma'am. It was a very pictorial, graphic presentation on this new topic. You have enlightened us. And I would also like to say that iSPELL is the healing muse for us, for literary disease bodies like people like me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
So if there are no further questions, let me now, I think, call upon Dr. Keshavnath, because we are lagging behind as far as the time is concerned. I think it's my duty to introduce the chairperson for the day. Dr. Keshav Nath is the Assistant Professor, Department of Languages, Manipal University, Jaipur. He has published in reputed national and international journals, indexed in Scopus and Care List. He has a long experience, a decade-long experience in teaching, and he has authored books. His areas of interest include critical theories, cognitive sciences, and a lot more. And he has also produced PhDs under his guidance. So I think we have got the right person here to have a summing up of the entire the discussions that we had today. So over to you, Dr. Keshav Nath.
Thank you, sir, and I thank everyone for present in this session. And I'll take the permission of Ghanshyam sir to begin with. So Dr. Professor Preeti in today's session deliberated upon various issues which are related to, in these days we call it as health and humanities. And now I remember when I say on this session that there was a program which I watched in Discovery. So it was that how do you communicate with the patients who are suffering with terminal illness? So you know that communication is always challenging in such situations because patients are going through a lot, for example, psychological, emotional, and spiritual distress, and that is very challenging for doctors. So, you know, doctor often tell patients that, and they may respond by, you know, explaining concerns with which are in biomedical terms, not with humanities or not with the human concerns. So, as we know, for example, just like ma'am said that last week we celebrated Breast Cancer Awareness Week, and this week is about mental health awareness week, and this session was all about explaining and expressing or the stories of the poets which talk about bodies that are suffering. So when a patient is briefed about his medical condition, so usually you know that he goes through three kind of experiences, and the poems that madam deliberated upon, I think it talked about you know, three things which I can say that patients, their conduct, patients, their conduct, their opinion, and which is most important is their existential concern. So when we talk about the themes in pathography, so usually in poetry it is all about illness and treatment, but you know that this is not something new. What it's my interpretation, you all may differ, but when we read the poetry of William Blake, Shelley, and Wordsworth, there we find that in their poems we find a pantheistic result of being one with nature. So once you realize that you are suffering a terminal illness, so you know that you try to connect with your through your poems to your suffering. And if we talk about these medical narratives, so for people suffering from illness or disability, poetry can provide a powerful means both of coping and communicating the ambiguities and inexplicabilities of their conditions, which they suffer or which they feel. Because when a doctor describes the experience of a patient, so for them it is just a body. For example, if you remember that there was a very famous movie which was released in 2006 or 7, I'm not sure about the year, but it was very famous, and it was by the name of Lage Raho Munna Bhai. So it was Munna Bhai MBBS. So there was a question. So if you remember that question, that there are new students in that college, and the professor, the dean of that college, asks them that why do you want to become a doctor? So that doctor, one of the girls, stands up and she says that because I think that I can become friends with patients. So that dean tells to that doctor, that young girl, that you cannot become a doctor because you are not here to make friends. And if you look at that movie, which describes about all the experiences of the patients, that you need to have a sympathy, because when a person goes through these kind of situations, his pen or his sensitivity increases. And through sensitive mind, you know that there are lyrics, what ma'am has shared in the slides. So you know that what I would say, that it is a way of ordering or reordering the chaos of experience that these survivors, or before their existence, they were writing. So we cannot say that this is something new, because epistemological issues are always there, and we find it in postmodern narratives, as Madam Purnima, if I'm pronouncing it right, she raises at one point of James Joyce. So there we very clearly see that this was happening. And if we see uh, Henry's last, a very famous story, The Last Leaf. So that is also about the existence of people. And what we find that what I found when Madam was deliberating upon this, that through a hermeneutic phenomenological analysis, we can look at the literature of modern times. And Madam has already said for Gärtner, and Hedger also contributed to the same thought. Because if we talk about all the poems that ma'am have described here, so I categorized structurally on 3 grounds. So first stage is all about being broken. Second is about becoming the whole. And third is experience the life world, which when they write, they talk about. Because, when you are being broken, when you are being told about your disease, you talk about your outer world, your pain, your despair. And sometimes when we talk about mental health, weak suicide also. Now, becoming the whole, when we talk about it, it goes in forms of connect. And there, the doctors or the medicines become the catalyst of change, what I can say as metaphor of change. And then we come to know about another aspect of all these poems. That is, the word that I would use here is resilience. And in the session, Madam also deliberated upon or enlightened us about the transformation of such patients. When we talk about is a kind of spiritual process. And medicine here, or the doctor here, becomes a metaphor of healing. And now, as ma'am was quietly deliberating, and Madam Purnima also correctly said that now what happens that all the corporate type hospitals, if you see, or cancer hospitals, they have started these kind of sessions where they say that, okay, you talk about your experience, you talk about your poetry. And there's a very famous movie a few days back on released on online platform. If you say Dil Bechara. So there, it's a story of 2 cancer patients. So there also you would find that these scenes are going on. And another thing, what is prominent here, that these dialogues, if you see, that these dialogues sometimes they become the moods of dejection, but sometimes when you read them, it becomes a kind of guide, or what I would say that these poems present the celebration of life that these people are experiencing. And here, when they write about their experience, as in 3 poems that we have observed, so here the body and mind becomes 2 separate entities. So it's just not like other poems where mind is just describing. So here the mind is controlling the entire body's experience, and how the mind is looking at the body. So that is again an important point. And another very important thing which all of us were enlightened by ma'am's talk was juxtaposition. So juxtaposition of life and death that we have come through. For example, the poem that ma'am cited, The Stethoscope. So that here we see the parallels narrative of the doctor, where he's encountering the death, and he is listening the heartbeats of a newborn or an infant which is going to be born. And in the same way, if you see that there is a very beautiful poem that I would like to take the name of that poem on this platform, is Sujata Bhatt's The Voice of the Unwanted Girl. And it's a very important poem in the history of feminism, or female feticide, where that experience has been narrated through the point of view of a female fetus, that they also feel that they have a kind of life, and the kind of pains that they have gone through. Then another poem that ma'am talked about was Midnight Cancer. And so in all these poems, what we observe that there is a pattern of chaos and silence. And ma'am's talk, if the doctors, modern doctors, would watch, and I believe that they will watch. So these medical practitioners, what the language that I would use, not doctors, medical practitioners of modern world need epiphanic knowledge of the emotions of the patient, because for doctor, it is just a medical encounter, but for patient, it is the body that faces the outcome. And Oates is an expert in that field, and I would like to sum up here by his word that the we need to interpret pathography in the context of life of patients, though there are both the narratives available with us, whether some from the doctor's point of view, but with some with patients. So, and all these poems, if we explore, all these poems are quite subjective in their nature, and these subjective poems, as in the example cited by ma'am, talks about all the tragic element. So I would quote Keats here, that we look before and after and pine for naught, and our sweetest songs are those which tells us of saddest thought. So with this, I would like to thank the chair, Ghanshyam sir, the convener, and Murli Krishnan sir, and Preeti ma'am for such an enlightening talk. Thank you so much, everyone, for bearing me.
Thank you, sir. Now, let me now call upon Dr. Ghanshyam to summarize and to speak on what has been delivered and what has been transacted over the last 1.5 hours.
Thank you very much, Murli Krishnan sir. Indeed, it's soothing and a beautiful kind of an evening of deceased bodies. We cannot expect a better lecture than this on Mental Health Day, the Universal Mental Health Day. It has given not only the impetus to the mind and the heart, but at the same time, it has given a solace to the body. The body requires all these things together so that the whole body can convert into a beautiful one. So amalgamation of all these things together, bringing poetry into the focus, and then bringing poetry to reach the souls, to reach the hearts, and then start vibrating. Because until or unless you eliminate the things, until or unless you make the things vibrate, the vibrations will not reach. So poetry, in a poem, the poet, what he does is he poses the eternal life. He poses the eternal life and he leads it towards what we call it as transports the life to a greater extent. And ma'am has done the same thing. Indeed, it was a wonderful presentation by bringing all those poetries together, bringing all the deceased kind of a mind together, and bringing a kind of a solace with the help of the flute. And that's why I always say October month is a month wherein the flute is blowing like anything. And it is not only attracting people, but it has made people to understand the very fact that, yes, this kind of deliberation, this kind of a Sunday Sahityak Satsang can bring all of us together. And the same kind of a justice was done by the chairperson also, Dr. Keshav Nath, and he has incorporated not only the poets of the Western world, but he has incorporated the Eastern poets. He has incorporated the Indian poet also with the same situation. So all these poets, beyond the borders and boundaries, what they do is they reach the soul, they reach the heart. And what is required by all of us is not sympathy, but empathy. All the doctors must have empathy. All the human beings must have empathy. And all the human beings must turn into being human. And the moment we become being human, it's nothing but the celebration of empathy. Let all of us bring this empathy on this particular world, on this universe, so that there will be no fight, no degradation, but only peace and solace with happiness. So thank you very much, Preeti ma'am, for enlightening us and doing not only justice, but I should say superior justice on this particular day on the platform of iSPELL. So iSPELL, please accept the gratitude of iSPELL. Thank you very much. And this certificate goes to Dr. Preeti Nair for doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL. And this is a token of love and appreciation, ma'am. Kindly accept it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So there are two people together today, Dr. Murli Krishnan on that end, and as a chairperson, we have Keshav Nath. So Keshav and Murli, one are the same, right? Both of them, they started playing their music, they started playing their tune, and they started luring the people. The way Murli Krishnan sir started, in the same way, Dr. Keshav Nath ended it. So the beginning and the end, both were really fantastic. So Dr. Keshav Nath, for doing this honor, kindly accept this.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm much obliged, and it is always challenging speaking in front of you, being your student.
Not only the beginning and the end, the middle also. Mr. Ghanshyam is also Same with Keshav and Murali Krishna, the same concept. And he's blowing the flute. So I have to say that. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Murali Krishnan sir, for doing the honors and bringing Preeti Nair ma'am this time from Kerala, and which was not even, I mean, we haven't been to the resource of Kerala, and you are doing that kind of a thing, and you are bringing all those them form of iSPELL and making this Sunday Sahityik Satsang of to you also. Thanks a lot to the unsung hero of iSPELL, who is none other than Mr.
Pramod.
And then live streaming it on YouTube. All these activities, this I tell you frankly that iSPELL believes in facilitating and elevating people. We don't provide any feedback link. We provide the certificate to the people, those who come on this platform as the chairperson and the speakers, but we do not give certificate to the participants, because we believe that the participants, those who come on this platform, if they learn something, if they facilitate something, then they will elevate themselves, and in that way they can certify themselves, because we believe certificates are not going to certify you. You become such a kind of an entity who can certify the certificate. So thank you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected. We will meet on the next